Awesome. All right, so this talk is about the art and science of facilitation, and it's a guide to masterful facilitation. What this talk is about is ultimately getting better workshop results by sequencing and structuring your workshops for impact. Now, when I say workshops, you can replace this with training or programs, whatever kind of intervention you are putting together, the principles and what I'm going to talk about still applies. My handwriting is very bad as well. Don't worry, I'm not going to annotate too much. Let me know if you can't read it. So what I'll do is I'm going to give you a bird's eye view of my approach of designing these interventions, and then give you two key tools that you can use straight away. We've got 60 minutes together, like we just shared. So what I'll do is I'll give you about a 35 to 40-minute talk. There'll be a few instances where I'll ask for some interaction, but what I'm going to do is wait until the end and create the space for you to ask any questions in a kind of a longer Q&A. And of course, if you want to get in touch afterwards, you're more than welcome to as well. So just a quick thing about me, as we heard, I'm a learning and development consultant, and I have a company called the Skills Lab. Now, I'm not going to go through my background again, but I will say that when I've put on learning experiences, workshops, and programs, they have included skill development workshops, leadership development, team development, organizational development, and service design consultancies. So when I talk about these frameworks, they apply for all those different those contexts. These are some of the more well-known clients I've worked with, and what I'll say is that everything that I share with you here is the exact same process that I've used when I've put on programming here, and what I teach other experts now as well. And this is really about trying to get people much more comfortable and quicker and more effective and efficient at designing great experiences. Now, having said that, I'd like to get a sense of like who's here. So what I'd love to do is just ask a few questions, and you can either use the emojis, the reactions with like a thumbs up, or you could just, if your camera is on, you can use your actual thumbs. But what I'm kind of curious to know is who here is actually just design, who here delivers training or workshops or programming? So actually sort of run sessions themselves. Bunch of thumbs up. So it looks like maybe about half of you or so. Okay. Who here also, or separately, who here designs learning, training, workshops, programs? Okay, so it's like again a mixed bag. Okay. And then who's had any formal guidance or training to do either the designing of the workshops or the delivering of the workshops? Or did you just, it's very different to making it up as you go along, which a lot of people do, like I did as well. Okay. And then last question, and you can put this in the chat. For those of you that do design, training, workshops, whatever, is there a specific methodology you use, like ADDIE or SAM or whatever it is? Just put it in the chat, or maybe it's I made up my own, or it's a little bit of everything. Just want to kind of get a sense of what's here. So the Sensei program is something that you've used. But yeah, anything in chat? A bit of everything, mix of, depends on the need. ADDIE principles stand out. Yeah, thanks, Andy. Anything else? Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Sunil. Images and data. Okay, cool. No formal experience. Functional training sessions. Okay, cool. All right. So I might not see all of the chat all the time. So if I miss something, Katrina, can you like let me know if something comes up? Okay.
Yes, agreed.
Awesome. All right. So regardless of whether you've had training or not, one of the things that I imagine happens, and I'm going to share my screen again. My button's not working as well. Hold on. There we go. So some of the challenges I see that happens is we can end up wasting a lot of time and energy deciding what goes in or doesn't go into workshops. Sometimes we don't know where to start. It can feel overwhelming and we procrastinate. There are times when we can work hard in sessions because there might be a few different reasons. People are getting lost about exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. Or for me, my most dreaded fear is where people look totally disengaged in a session and they look like they would rather be somewhere else, and it takes some effort to win them over. And all of this essentially leads to maybe not being fully present in a workshop or a training, and ultimately leading to hit and miss results. Sometimes you have great sessions, other times you have okay sessions. And something that's not on this list, but I will add it, is because it comes up a lot when I talk to other experts, is imposter syndrome, where even though we're experts and we've had success, we can sometimes feel a little bit worried about, are we the right person to be in this room, because we're not sure about the design of our experience. So having said that, I'm just curious, in the chat, put 1, 2, 3, or 4, which one of these like kind of resonates with you the most? Three, twos. There's a bunch of 3s and 2s. Yeah. There's a 4. Thank you for your honesty. Yeah, 3 and 4. Okay, so not so much of 1. This is good. But maybe there is a little bit of 1 in there as well. So 3s. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so with that said, the opportunity really here is to ultimately save time and energy, to wow people with energizing sessions and have a more consistent impact, and of course, feel confident in our design and facilitation. Now, what sometimes gets in the way is these are some of the mistakes that I've encountered myself, and when I work with other experts who put on training or workshops, these are some of the things that I have come across. The first bullet point is around, like, another way to say it is like winging it, if you've come across that expression. We rely too much on our intuition, our enthusiasm, or especially with some experts, being really good with people to kind of as our trump card. Now, this can only go so far, but it's not always stress-free or sustainable. The second thing here, I'm going to put some sad faces here, is sometimes we take a transactional approach. Now, not realizing that we're actually taking people on a journey. We're taking them from somewhere to somewhere else. And this is a difference with what I would say being transactional, which is, this is what we're doing, compared to being transformational, which is, this is where we're going, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. And the final mistake I see here is being trapped by the curse of knowledge. Now, I don't know if you've come across this cognitive bias in the past. It's where we assume that other people have the same background knowledge as we do, and we find it hard when other people don't just get it, even when we've explained it to them. So what this means when we're running training, when we're running workshops or whatever it is that we might not set up instructions clearly enough as we might want to, or we might not really help people lead them towards their aha moment or their insights. And that means that we're missing the mark around actually having the impact. So having shared that, what I'm going to do today in this talk is really talk about how facilitation is both obviously, it's a combination of creativity, intuition, and structure. So what I'll do is first go over the methodology that I've created called Facilitation by Design. It's a framework. It ultimately helps you decide what goes in and doesn't go into your training or workshop. Then we'll take a storytelling approach to help you craft the experience, really helping people to go on that journey that we talked about. And then I have a facilitation structure. It's called Spark. It's an evidence-based process of fully engaging your workshop attendees in the workshop and helping them get to the meaningful insights and outcomes. As a sort of side point, the Spark framework also is really good at timing activities. I don't know if you've ever done workshops and they kind of go over time. Some activities take too long and like, damn it, I'm running out of time. Anyway, so this is also really helpful for that. So yeah, everything I'm going to share is all about helping the facilitation go right. It's all about the mitigation of helping facilitation go right. Of course, when you're in the workshop, there's things come up that this will help to kind of reduce the risk of that. Okay, so let's start off with facilitation by design. Here is the framework. Oops. What I say, when I kind of share, and I'm going to annotate this, this is the culmination of this 20 years of experience that I've had put on programming, because, and when I've been working with other experts, we get all these like great tools, methods, principles, but really no one's ever kind of showed us explicitly, just like a lot of you have, how to put it together into an engaging session. And so this process really helps us do that. And it starts with the premise that great facilitation doesn't just happen, it's intentional and it's designed. That's why it's called Facilitation by Design. And what I'll do is, first of all, give you a whistle-stop tour of this framework and then really focus on the first phase, because that's really important. So what's involved here? Right. Now, there are three kind of pillars of great facilitation. Obviously, when we think about facilitation, it's all about delivering a great session. Of course, to deliver a great session, we've got to build a fit-for-purpose session. And to build a fit-for-purpose session, we have to really define the problem that this is solving and for who. Now, if you're like me and you run sessions or workshops, it's really tempting to want to jump to designing a workshop too soon. You want to kind of go and build it. Like, what am I going to put inside it? You know, let me build the PowerPoint, because that's what, you know, I want to like share with people. Except this is essentially the thing that ends up wasting a lot of time designing workshops, because we're like going, oh, what should I include, this or that? Maybe imposter syndrome can kick in because we haven't done the first bit, for the define phase first. So here, well, like I said, I'm going to just spend a little bit of time on define, because this is one bit which I find a lot of people skip over. And if you get this right, so much of the rest of the things happen easier. And what defining your workshop or trainings problem is all about is being really clear with what your workshop or training seeks to achieve and what the tangible benefits are for the people coming to your session. And so the first thing is about really going and understanding, identify the transformation. And this is basically asking yourself, who is my training for, and what transformation do they want in their lives or their work? So what problem do they have, and what goal do they want to achieve? Now, this is not just a needs analysis around like what's their functional role and what they need to actually do in their job. There's also about looking at them as people and considering their drivers, like what are they moving away from? What are they moving towards? Like, what are their kind of aspirations? What are their motivations? What are their fears? anxieties, that kind of stuff. It's like, it's really kind of textured around like who the people are as individuals. And then the second step is now we can unpack our expertise, right? This is about going, okay, well, how can we help people get there? Now, this can be to do with content, which I'm depicting as dots. It could be about the actual intervention. Is the workshop? Is it training? Maybe it's peer learning groups. Maybe whatever it is, it's like, what are the different kind of bits, the things that you can facilitate the learning? And then once we've got all that, we can start to describe the value, which is essentially the why. And the way we do this is, or the way I recommend is going, okay, identify where in this sort of transformation, we're wanting to have an intervention around, then picking the right tools and methods and whatever, and essentially positioning what we're doing in the transformation. So it's not just a, hey, this thing is really great. It's about going, this thing that you want to achieve, this is why it's going to be important for you, because you will be able to do X, Y, or Z. Now, I can talk at length, almost it's another talk about how to describe value, but ultimately you can break this down with what you want people to know, how you want them to feel, and what you want them to do. So there's definitely like this sort of feeling component, which isn't always kind of, when we're thinking about instructional design, it's not always there. But when you're thinking about human-centered design and thinking about taking people on a journey, we want to kind of chime in on the emotional journey people are going to go on.
Pedram,
So,
sorry,
yes.
maybe before you continue, there's a question in the chat from Noella. She's asking, what if we don't know the audience?
That's a very good question. And so one thing which I always recommend, if at all possible, is seeing if you can, it always starts here. It depends on your context. In my context, if I'm engaging with a client, I'd say, can I speak to a sample of like the audience that are going to benefit from this? And I just have a very quick, like a little mini focus group with them. So that's one way. There's other ways you can do this is surveys, like training surveys, just to kind of ask a few questions to get a lay of the land. One thing which I did, very light touch with all of you right now, I asked you a bunch of questions. Who designs training? Who delivers training? What do you use? So I didn't have the benefit of meeting you all beforehand, and this is not the full workshop, but I still try to understand things that way. Does that help? No, yeah? Okay. So, as I said, I kind of focused on the define, because once you get this right, then the build phase becomes so much easier. So the next step, and I'll go through this a lot quicker because the next two bits of my talk is really focusing on this. When we're really clear around our value proposition, this big why and the kind of very tangible benefits, then it becomes easier to decide what goes in and doesn't go into your workshop or training. So you can plan the experience, which is like, what's the journey that we're taking people on. Then once we've got the overall journey, it's about structuring the training or workshop, which is all about making sure that you have a very clear structured plan that people are going to get the most out of. And then it's about creating the material. So if you were like me back in the day, and like, I'm going to start building the PowerPoint, this is step 6 in this process. So this is building the workshop. And then when it comes to the last phase of delivering, and feeling confident with your design, maximizing the impact, and really making sure that you're evidencing that impact, the first step here is all about kind of measuring impact and the sort of the evaluation framework and the tools and all that stuff, which if we're really clear with the described value step, this becomes a lot easier because we're really clear about exactly what they're going to get out of it. Then it's about preparing for delivery. It's about preparing yourself, preparing any co-leads, preparing your audience members, preparing the venue, if it's an external venue, like everything you need to do to make sure that everything's in place, basically a big checklist. And then finally, it's delivery, but really it's about managing, I can't spell properly, let me try that again. Managing group dynamics. Now, managing group dynamics then pulls in everything that you've done before. So when you're clear with who's coming and what they want to achieve in their work or their lives, that's how you can meet them where they're at the beginning of the workshop. Then you're using why it's important as a way of engaging them to begin with. You're putting together your plan, you're executing your plan, using your structure and your material. Your impact measures, your evaluation tools are being deployed, and all the prep that you've done really comes into play. That's why I call this whole framework facilitation by design, because facilitation happens way before you step into a room somewhere. So that's facilitation by design. This is all about making sure that all the hard work is done beforehand. As I said, we are going to have some questions at the end, but I just did want to just pause and see if there's any kind of burning questions that people have right now about this. Yes, Mustak.
Hi everyone. Yes. So my question is, how do we measure the effectiveness of the session once it's delivered? For example, today you are delivering the session. In case if you have to measure the tangible benefits which have been accomplished by this session, are there any ways or is there any methodology in place which helps us to gauge the effectiveness of the session?
Yeah, good question. So this session is Katrina and I didn't discuss like impact measures or anything like that. This is me kind of sharing some know-how. But if we did, what I would agree with Katrina in advance is specifically what are the tangible kind of outcomes, and I would use this as verbs, like writing these using verbs. And this is why there's a difference between a talk and a workshop or a training. This workshop or training, it's a bit more hands-on. So people would be actually doing things. So they are practicing things, they are discussing things, they are expressing things, they are identifying things, they are choosing things. There's a whole bunch of verbs. Like, in fact, I've got a list of verbs that I use to design all of my training, and I can share this with you all afterwards. But the reason I say that is because when you're really clear with those verbs, then at the end of a session, you can ask people, to what extent do you feel that we achieved these objectives? And if it says things like, I'm going to hypothetically, right? We're doing a session on feedback, right? Did you practice, like by the end of the session, you would have practiced I've got a feedback model called COIN, the COIN feedback model. Then they can say yes or no, so that's one thing. And then that's telling you whether you achieved those, like the actions in the workshop. You can then ask questions like, how relevant was this to your work? You can ask questions like, how motivated are you to use this in your work? How able are you to use this? And then you can ask questions like, I don't need any more. I am able, I don't need any practice, or I think I can do it, like something, but I need a little bit more practice and guidance. So you can ask those kinds of questions just to get a sense check of like proxy measures of how effective it was. And then you can have a follow-up, because oftentimes one training as a standalone isn't going to affect change. You need kind of multiple sessions or maybe a follow-up or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Brilliant. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the storytelling approach, because this is really sorry, I'm going to actually not show you the thing on that, right? But the big idea I want to share with you here is that we're taking people on a journey, right? And I'm going to make an assumption that all of you have a bunch of tools, exercises, or activities that you want to share with people, like principles. And if you don't, I actually have a bunch of resources I can share afterwards as well, Katrina. So with this assumption, I'm going to share the storytelling approach, and you can also like think about how this might relate to any of the sessions that you design, or even like a session that you're asked to deliver. You can maybe see how you can adapt this approach. Right. So the first thing of a story is the setup, right? Sometimes it's called an exposition. This is the background information on the characters. You're setting the scene. You're priming the audience for the rest of the story. So in a workshop or training, the characters are the attendees, and you're setting the scene for their context. So all that identified transformation stuff is really going to come in handy here. You're introducing the topic. You're helping the audience recognize why it's important to them. You're giving the audience a roadmap of what's going to happen. And all of this can happen actually before your workshop or your training. You can actually send information beforehand. You can send a loom or whatever. Then you have something called, in fact, I'm going to just move this to one side. In a story, you then have something called the inciting incident. This is represented by this hump. This is the triggering event in a story where all the main bits of the story come into motion. The audience starts to see what the story is really about. So in a workshop, the purpose of the inciting incident is to dip the people in the context of the training or the workshop. So if the setup was about explaining the context, the inciting incident is about having people feel the context, right? So if you're running a workshop on team creativity, you might kick things off with like a creative game, like giving people 1 minute to draw as many unique things in a circle and then have a conversation about what that was like. So in a way, you're kind of getting people to start experiencing creativity rather than telling them about creativity. That's what I mean about feeling it. But you don't have to be super creative, like crazy with that inciting incident. It can be as simple as a check-in question that asks something like, what's important about this topic for your work? Or what do you want to get out of this session? That way you're kind of creating that cognitive function of really relating to why this might be important to their lives or their work. And here you're beginning to help the people are beginning to get into the rest of the activities, because the next thing is around in a story is called the rising action. So rising action is a successive plot twist. So in a training session, it's the things that you do, like what you explain to your audience, and the things you have your audience do to get them insights, awareness, new knowledge. They might be creating something. So this is really about like, if this is sort of setting the context, this is all about sharing know-how and your activities, right? So this is what just the active stuff of things. So in that team creativity example, you might be uncovering principles behind creativity. You're recognizing what hinders creativity, what helps creativity, maybe you practice a few creative exercises. You're just basically building all the way to the climax, which is where everything comes together. Like, it's the culmination of every other bit of the session, and it's usually linked heavily on that kind of the value, that value proposition, or the thing that this workshop or training is aiming to achieve. So again, in that example, team creativity, this might be bringing together those creative principles, and you give them a brief to create something that they're going to then use as a team after your workshop. That's where everything's coming together. And then finally, in the story, I have it's called a falling action. In a way, in a workshop, this is about integration. You're kind of reflecting on what the experience was like. So you're having the debrief conversations. What did you learn? How are you going to use it? All that stuff. And then the final thing is the key kind of points or key learning points. So you're leaving people with kind of the resolution. Actually, it's called the resolution in a resolution. But in a workshop, it's about basically your key learning points. And so this is where you're kind of tying up all the loose ends. Even if there's like another session coming, it's like you're wrapping up this one and you're kind of setting up the next one. So this is how you can use like the idea about taking people on a journey to really just go from being transactional to being transformational. And then finally, we have the SPARK framework. But before I go into the SPARK framework, again, any burning questions, knowing that in about 10 minutes, we can ask loads of questions. Okay, I will continue. So finally, this is the next thing which I use in every single workshop training that I deliver. It's all about the anatomy of the workshop's experience, the training experience. Now, this is an acronym, SPARK, which I've made up, and it's a combination of loads of other things that I've learned. So behavioral science, Kolb's learning theory, and all those things. It's super intuitive when I tell you it, so you'll be able to remember it. And as a process, it does incorporate learning theory that engages people. And you'll know that if you skip a step in this process, you'll ultimately find it harder to get buy-in or bring people back when they're doing activities. Right, so it starts really simple, like very straightforward. Let me just go back one second. It's very similar to the learning journey. But if you think about the learning journey as the entire workshop, this is about the activities, right? So all activities still need to set the scene, right? That's what the first S is about. You're introducing the activity and you're giving enough information to let the people know what's going on, why they're doing it, and very high level, how the experience will go. So the what can be as simple as the name of the activity. The why can be anything to do with the journey that they're going on. So, hey, we just did this thing. We're going to do this other thing. And that's why this thing is really important. Or the why could be really important in terms of the overall aim of the training. Hey, this thing is going to help you do your job really quicker. Just like really giving the why. And then the how is not giving instructions. It's just giving a very high level overview. And this is all where we're basically sowing the seeds of the outcomes that we want the participants to get. And it only should take about maximum 5 minutes, no more, usually 3 minutes. So I'm going to give you another example. If I'm running a workshop around values, the importance of values for emerging leaders, the things that make you tick, I might say something like, we're about to do a values mining exercise. That's the what. it's important for us to know our core values so we can make decisions and take action from a place of meaning. That's the why. To help us get clear with our values, we'll work in small groups to share short stories that help us uncover what makes us tick. That's the how. That's basically 3 super quick things that you can share that sets the scene and you get going. Then the first P here is you present information if it's needed, right? So this is where you might share a big idea that somebody needs before they do an experience. Sometimes you don't need to do it. Sometimes you can just go straight into the next P, which I'll tell you. But if this is about values, I might spend a couple of minutes explaining what values are before we go into the activity. Because then the next thing is you provide guidance. Here is where you're providing clear instructions and telling people how long they have for a task. I've done this so many times in the past where I go, blah, 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 go and do this. And then the people get on with it. And I was like, going to tell them that they've got 10 minutes and they're still getting settled in or whatever, right? Now, this is also where you check if people have any questions before they do the activity and make sure you build some time up for this. And a top tip, if you're going to put people into groups and they need resources, do all the logistics before you give the instructions. So you might say, hey, we're going to do this group activity. So before I give you the instructions, we're going to get you into groups of 3 or groups of 4. Or if it's a breakout room, you're going to set up the breakout rooms beforehand. So it's like, that's all set. So you can press a button rather than giving the instructions and trying to sort out the breakout rooms. And if you've got another top tip, if you've got some slides, if you've got instructions, make sure they're available somehow, somewhere, on slides, in the chat, on a presentation, whatever it is, so that people, once you've given the instructions, they've got a reference point. And then once you've done that, you activate the experience. You're letting people just get on with the experience. This is about them being active and engaged in the activity, not trying to conceptualize anything, they're just getting on with things. And for longer activities, what I would recommend is that you have checkpoints. Generally speaking, I don't think that it's useful for people to do any one thing for more than 20 minutes. Just like have a checkpoint within 20 minutes or so. And then the R is reflect on the experience. And this is essentially your debrief. This is the most essential part of any learning experience that I think is oftentimes skipped or forgotten. People kind of assume people are going to join the dots afterwards. They don't always do that. So giving enough time to do that is really important. And an acronym I want you to remember is, included in this acronym, is ELA. So one question, the first thing you want to ask people is, what was the experience like? What was that like? You know, just to burn through that. What did you learn? Or any insights? And how you're going to apply this to your job or work. Going through the scales that way, make sure that people will can tell you whether they liked it or not, and that's fine. I always think like, you know, was it hard? Was it easy? I accept any response. That's the kind of the experience bit, because everyone's reaction is valid. People learn different things, and if you've kind of set things up well, then you can guide the learning towards a specific outcomes that you wanted. And then finally, the key learning points. Key learning points. So this is about taking this conversation and summarizing it. And the more words you use that your audience has used in their reflections, the more they feel that they've been listened to, and they've been part of the learning process. And that's why I always think it's always useful to give enough space for that in an experiential workshop. And so, yeah, this is the SPARK framework. Now, you can see if you skip any part of this, like, for example, if you don't spend enough time setting up the activity or presenting information, you go maybe straight to providing guidance in the activity, people might get lost. Like, why are we doing this? Or, you know, I don't know the thing that I need to get this done. And so there you go. the Facilitation by Design methodology. It's a process. Then you sequence it like a narrative and a story, and then you use the Spark framework to make sure that you're facilitating clear and impactful activities. So with that said, I'll kind of stop sharing my screen and presenting and just see if there's any questions.